7 days from now, your life will either look exactly the same or it will be completely unrecognizable. Not because of luck, not because of talent, but because of the decisions you are willing to make starting today. Most people don't fail because they lack time, talent, or opportunity. They fail because they keep negotiating with a version of themselves that should have been fired a long time ago. If you want to become unrecognizable in 7 days, it doesn't start with motivation. Motivation is emotional. Emotions change. Transformation starts with a decision, a real decision, the kind of decision that removes all alternatives. Because the moment you leave yourself an option to quit, you eventually will. Understand this, you don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your standards. Goals are things you hope for. Standards are things you live by. If your standard is comfort, your life will always look familiar. But if your standard becomes discipline, focus, and execution, then in 7 days, your old self won't even recognize you. Not because of luck, not because of miracles, but because you stop tolerating what you used to accept. Most people think change means adding more habits, more routines, more plans, but the fastest way to transform is subtraction. Remove the distractions, remove the excuses, remove the conversations that keep you average, remove the environments that reward laziness. You don't need a new life. You need to stop feeding the old one. The version of you that procrastinates survives only because you keep giving it attention. Your mornings are not neutral. They are directional. How you start the day decides who you become by the end of it. If the first thing you do every morning is reach for your phone, you're letting the world tell you who to be. But when you take control of the morning, you take control of your identity. Silence, clarity, movement, intention, these are not small habits. They are identity-shaping actions when the morning and the rest of the day doesn't stand a chance. Here's a hard truth. Talking feels like progress, but execution is the only thing that pays. Most people announce what they're going to do because it gives them the emotional reward without the work. But silent discipline is dangerous. It compounds. When you stop explaining yourself and start producing results, people don't need updates. They see evidence. Let your results introduce you. If you want to become unrecognizable in 7 days, you must stop asking, what should I do? And start asking, who must I become? Behavior doesn't change until identity does. When you see yourself as disciplined, you don't argue with yourself about showing up, you just do. When you see yourself as focused, distractions lose their power. Identity drives behavior, and behavior creates outcomes. 7 days is not magic, it's momentum, it's proof. It's the moment you show yourself that the old you was a choice, not a destiny. In 7 days of focused decisions, ruthless standards, controlled mornings, and relentless execution, you won't just look different, you'll think different. And once your thinking changes, your life has no choice but to follow. Become unrecognizable, not to impress people, but to prove something to yourself. Because the most dangerous person in the room is the one who finally decided to become who they've always known they could be. Most people think discipline is about fighting yourself every day, but that's not discipline. That's exhaustion. Real transformation begins when you decide once, not daily. The moment you require yourself to renegotiate the same decision over and over, you give weakness a vote. Every day you wake up and ask, should I do this today? You are allowing doubt, emotion, and comfort to sit at the table. And comfort always argues better in the morning. That's why most people don't lack willpower, they lack finality. A powerful decision is not emotional, it's conclusive. It's the difference between saying, I'll try, and saying, this is who I am now. When a decision is final, behavior becomes automatic. You don't debate brushing your teeth. You don't debate stopping at a red light. Why? Because those decisions were made once, long ago, and now they operate as standards. The same principle applies to growth. When you decide once that quitting is no longer an option, your mind stops searching for exits and starts looking for solutions. Daily decisions drain mental energy. Every choice costs you something. And when you waste your best energy deciding whether or not to show up, you have nothing left to actually perform. High performers simplify their lives by removing unnecessary decisions. They don't ask themselves if they feel like working. They've already decided that they work regardless of feelings. Feelings are temporary. Decisions shape identity. The reason most people keep starting over is because they never truly start. They leave themselves an escape hatch. They tell themselves, if it gets too hard, I can stop. But the moment you give yourself permission to quit, quitting becomes a strategy instead of a failure. Decide once that your standards are non-negotiable. Decide once that discipline is no longer optional. Decide once that the version of you who makes excuses no longer gets a vote. When you decide once, pressure changes you instead of breaking you. Obstacles don't feel personal, they feel expected. You stop being surprised by difficulty because you already accounted for it in your decision. You didn't decide to act only when it's easy. You decided to act regardless. That's when consistency stops feeling heroic and starts feeling normal. This is how identity is built. You don't become confident by convincing yourself daily that you're confident. You become confident by deciding once that you are the type of person who follows through. Every action after that simply confirms the decision. Momentum doesn't come from motivation, it comes from alignment. When your actions align with a final decision, progress accelerates. Decide once and let time do the rest. Let repetition reinforce what decision established. Let discipline turn into habit and habit turn into character. Because the strongest people are not the ones who fight themselves every day. They are the ones who ended the argument a long time ago. Most people approach growth the same way they approach a cluttered room. They keep buying new furniture instead of throwing anything away. They think progress comes from adding more habits, more routines, more strategies, more information. But transformation doesn't begin with addition. It begins with elimination. You don't become powerful by stacking new behaviors on top of a weak foundation. You become powerful by removing what is draining your focus, your energy, and your standards. Every distraction you tolerate is silently training you to stay the same. The phone you check without thinking, the conversations that go nowhere, the environments that reward comfort over effort, all of them cost you something. Not immediately, but consistently. And consistency is what shapes identity. You can't add discipline to a life that is full of distractions and expect it to survive. The distractions will always win unless they are removed first. Elimination is uncomfortable because it forces honesty. It forces you to admit that some of the things you enjoy are the very things holding you back. Not everything that feels good is good for you, and not everything that's familiar is aligned with where you're trying to go. Growth requires you to audit your life with precision. Look at what you do every day and ask a hard question. Does this move me forward or keep me entertained? Most people don't need more time. They need fewer leaks. Energy leaks, focus leaks, attention leaks. They complain about being overwhelmed, but overwhelm is often self-inflicted. When your life is full of noise, clarity can't survive. When your schedule is packed with low-value activity, high-value progress gets pushed out. Before you add a single new habit, remove the behaviors that contradict it. Elimination creates space, and space is where progress happens. When you remove what doesn't matter, what does matter becomes obvious. Your mind becomes quieter. Your actions become sharper. Your standards rise naturally because you're no longer negotiating with chaos. You don't need more motivation. You need fewer distractions competing for your attention. This applies to people as much as it applies to habits. Some relationships keep you anchored to an old version of yourself. They reward you for staying the same and resist when you try to grow. Not everyone can go where you're going. And that doesn't make them bad people. It just makes them incompatible with your next level. Elimination is not about arrogance, it's about alignment. The reason elimination works so fast is because it produces immediate relief. The moment you stop doing what's holding you back, progress feels lighter. Discipline feels easier. Focus feels natural. You realize that growth was never about forcing more effort. It was about removing resistance. Before you try to add a new routine, eliminate the excuse that keeps showing up. Before you chase a new goal, eliminate the habit that undermines it. Before you ask for more capacity, eliminate the behaviors that waste what you already have. Because once you clear the excess, what remains has room to grow. You don't need to become more, you need to carry less. Most people live their lives chasing goals, believing that once they reach a certain milestone, everything will change. They tell themselves that. When they make more money, get in better shape, or achieve a certain title, they'll finally become disciplined, confident, and fulfilled. But goals don't change people, standards do. A goal is something you aim for in the future. A standard is something you live by in the present. And the life you're living right now is not a reflection of your goals, it's a reflection of your standards. Goals are optional. You can abandon a goal without changing how you see yourself. You can delay it, excuse it, or redefine it when it becomes uncomfortable. Standards don't work that way. A standard is a line you refuse to cross. It's what you do even when no one is watching, even when it's inconvenient, even when it costs you comfort. When your standard changes, your behavior changes automatically because violating a standard feels wrong, not just disappointing. This is why people hit goals and still end up back where they started. They lose the weight, then gain it back. They make the money, then lose it. They experience temporary success without permanent change because they never upgraded the rules they live by. If your standard for health is convenience, no fitness goal will ever last. If your standard for work is effort only when you feel motivated, no career breakthrough will be sustainable. Standards remove negotiation. When your standard is to show up on time, you don't debate it. When your standard is to tell the truth, you don't weigh the pros and cons. The decision is already made. This is where consistency comes from. Not from willpower, but from identity. You act in alignment with your standards because they define who you are. Raising your standards is uncomfortable because it exposes the gap between who you say you want to be and how you're currently living. It forces you to confront excuses you've been acting. But that discomfort is productive. It's the signal that real change is happening. The moment you raise your standards, certain behaviors become unacceptable. Certain environments stop feeling comfortable. Certain conversations lose their appeal. Growth becomes less about effort and more about alignment. The most powerful standards are internal. They're not based on external pressure or validation. They don't require applause. They're enforced by self-respect. When your self-respect increases, your standards rise naturally. You stop tolerating inconsistency. You stop explaining why you didn't follow through. You stop lowering the bar to protect your ego. If you want a different life, stop setting bigger goals and start living by higher standards. Decide what is no longer acceptable. Decide what you refuse to tolerate from yourself, because the moment your standards change, your goals don't need motivation. They become inevitable. Most people don't lose their day in the afternoon. They lose it in the first hour after they wake up. The morning is not just the start of the day. It's the foundation of your identity. How you begin determines how you think, how you move, and how you respond to everything that follows. If you start the morning in reaction, you spend the rest of the day in recovery. But when you take control early, momentum works in your favor instead of against you. The first moments after waking are when your mind is most impressionable. Whatever you feed IT first sets the tone. When the first thing you reach for is your phone, you're allowing other people's priorities, opinions, and emergencies to hijack your focus. You haven't even decided who you're going to be yet, but you're already responding to the world. Winning the morning means deciding before the world does. Structure creates freedom. A disciplined morning removes the chaos that most people accept as normal. You don't need a complicated routine, you need a deliberate one. Movement wakes the body. Stillness sharpens the mind. Intention aligns your actions. These are not habits for productivity, they are practices for control. When you win the morning, you don't chase focus, focus follows you. Morning discipline compounds because it builds trust with yourself. Every time you do what you said you would do before the day gets loud, your confidence increases. Not motivational confidence, but grounded confidence. The kind that comes from evidence. That self-trust changes how you operate. You hesitate less. You execute faster. You tolerate fewer excuses because you've already proven you can lead yourself. Most people wait for the day to go right before they show up fully. High performers show up fully so the day goes right. They don't ask how they feel. They honor the commitment they made the night before. When you win the morning, decision fatigue decreases. You've already done something hard. You've already chosen discipline. That choice echoes throughout the rest of the day. Winning the morning doesn't guarantee a perfect day, but it guarantees a prepared one. Problems feel smaller when you're already in control. Distractions have less power when you're already focused. By the time most people are waking up mentally, you've already created momentum that carries you forward. The day doesn't defeat people. Disorder does. And order starts in the morning. Win it consistently and your days stop feeling random. They start feeling intentional, and intentional days, repeated, create an unrecognizable life. Most people don't struggle with a lack of ideas. They struggle with a surplus of words. They talk about what they're going to do, who they're going to become, and what's coming next. But talking creates a dangerous illusion of progress. The brain rewards discussion the same way it rewards execution, which is why so many people feel productive while remaining unchanged. When you talk too much, you spend the emotional currency before the work is done. Execution doesn't need applause, it needs consistency. The moment you announce your plans, you invite opinions, distractions, and validation. You give your goals a public life before they have a private foundation. And once validation replaces discipline, momentum dies. Silent execution keeps your focus internal. It removes pressure to perform for others and replaces it with a commitment to produce for yourself. Talking also weakens urgency. When something truly matters, you move. You don't explain, you don't justify, you don't wait for permission. The more time you spend discussing, the less time you spend building. Progress happens in solitude, repetition, and discomfort, none of which make for exciting conversations. That's why execution is rare and results are respected. There is power in being underestimated. When people don't know your next move, they can't interfere with it. Silence creates space for deep work. It protects your energy from unnecessary debates and self-doubt disguised as advice. Most opinions are not guidance, they're projections. When you execute quietly, you move faster and cleaner. Results speak in a language everyone understands. You never have to convince people of what you've done. The evidence does that for you. Talking tries to pull the future into the present. Execution lets the present build the future. One is emotional, the other is effective. When you talk less, you hear more. You notice patterns, you recognize resistance, you become aware of what actually matters instead of what sounds impressive. Execution sharpens judgment because it produces feedback. You learn faster by doing than by explaining. If you want to separate yourself from the crowd, reduce your words and increase your output. Let silence become your strategy. Let action become your identity. Because in the end, the world doesn't reward potential, it rewards proof. Most people try to change their lives by chasing results, believing that once the outcomes improve, they will finally feel confident, disciplined, and fulfilled. They tell themselves that when the money comes, they'll become focused. When the body changes, they'll become disciplined. And when the recognition arrives, they'll finally believe in themselves. But results don't create identity. Identity creates results. And until who you believe you are changes, what you produce will always return to what's familiar. Your identity is the set of beliefs you hold about yourself, most of which operate quietly in the background. It's the voice that answers the question, what kind of person am I? And every action you take is an attempt to stay consistent with that answer. If you see yourself as someone who gives up when things get uncomfortable, no amount of motivation will override that belief for long. Behavior can change temporarily, but identity always pulls you back. This is why short bursts of progress often collapse. People borrow discipline instead of becoming disciplined. They force habits without changing self-perception. They try to act like a different person without deciding to be one. And the mind resists that mismatch. The fastest way to change behavior is not to focus on what you're doing, but on who you're becoming. When identity shifts, actions stop feeling forced. A disciplined person doesn't rely on motivation. Discipline is simply what they do. A focused person doesn't battle distractions. They don't identify with them. A consistent person doesn't start and stop. They follow through because stopping would violate who they believe themselves to be. Identity creates internal alignment, and alignment creates momentum. The strongest identities are built through evidence. You don't change your identity by repeating affirmations. You change it by keeping promises to yourself. Every small action that aligns with your desired identity becomes proof. Proof turns into belief. Belief turns into behavior. Behavior turns into results. But the sequence matters. Reverse it, and progress becomes fragile. This is why discipline feels heavy for some people and natural for others. It's not about effort. It's about self-image. When your identity is clear, decisions are easier. You don't debate what to do because the decision has already been made by who you believe you are. You act in alignment because anything else would feel dishonest. If you want lasting change, stop chasing outcomes and start becoming the person who naturally produces them. Decide who you are first. Let your actions confirm it. Let the results catch up. Because when identity leads, success follows. And when success follows, it stays. At the end of the day, this is not about 7 days on a calendar. It's about a line you draw in your life, a line between who you've been and who you are no longer willing to be. Becoming unrecognizable doesn't require perfection, talent, or approval. It requires a decision, a standard, and the courage to act before you feel ready. When you decide once, eliminate what no longer serves you, raise your standards, take control of your mornings, execute in silence, and lead with identity, you stop hoping for change and start enforcing it. These are not tactics, they are principles. And principles, when lived consistently, reshape outcomes. 7 days is enough to prove something to yourself, enough to build momentum, enough to break old patterns and establish new ones. And once you see what's possible in 7 days, you'll never look at your potential the same way again. The goal isn't to impress the world. The goal is to become someone you respect when no one is watching. Because when you change who you are, everything you touch begins to change with you.